What is up, guys? Welcome back to another UFC prediction video. This week we got UFC Vegas 87. I'm going to be going through the full card, giving my predictions for each of the fights. Last week we didn't do super great at UFC Mexico, but we had a lot of unexpected outcomes happen on that card. So I think this one's going to be a little bit more predictable, and I'm going to get right into my predictions with the first fight on the card. All right, with the first fight on the card, we got Ludovic Klein versus AJ Cunningham. In this fight, I'm going to take Ludovic Klein to win by a knockout in the second round. Ludovic Klein is more proven in the UFC. He's beaten higher levels of competition simply because he's been in the UFC. He's beaten Ignacio Bahamondes, recently had a draw with Jai Herbert, which isn't a horrible look, and AJ Cunningham recently lost on the Contender Series in an absolute war. I'll give him credit. He is a dog, but in terms of overall skill, talent, and how the fight should play out from a reasonable standpoint, I think that Klein's going to eventually find the TKO because AJ Cunningham just simply doesn't really have the skill, the defense to be able to hang with the top level guys. And I think that the UFC just needed a short-term replacement for this fight, an opponent for Klein, because Joe Alvarez had to pull out. So with that being said, I'm going to take Klein by a second round knockout. And Klein hasn't lost since he got submitted by Nate the Train in 2021. So it's been a long time since he has lost. I think he'll keep his momentum going here and win by KO. Next fight on the card, we got Loik Radzhabov versus Abdul Karim El Sawadi. And I am going to take El Sawadi to win this fight. He impressed me pretty good in his Dana White Contender Series win. Displayed some really good countering ability, displayed some overall good striking, and I think that he'll be able to get a decision here over Radzhabov. Radzhabov has kind of been all over the place, just to look at a few of the promotions he's fought in. 2 years ago, PFL, 2 years ago, PFL, then Eagle FC, and then he finally did get into the UFC. So he's been in different promotions, hasn't been fighting the best of the best, and I think that El Sawadi is going to come in here hungry to get a victory in his first UFC fight. Just has more momentum in this circumstance. So I'm going to take him to win by a decision. I don't think he's going to get a knockout or a finish. He's the younger fighter as well, being only 28 years of age, with Loik being 33. And I think he's just going to have a speed advantage. Loik does seem a little bit slow, a little bit plotty. And I think that El Sawadi will be able to coast to a pretty comfortable decision in this fight. Next fight on the card, we got Leroy Duncan versus Claudio Ribeiro. I'm going to go with Leroy Duncan to get a nice little British decision here. Claudio Ribeiro, of course, got chinned really badly in his last outing versus Roman Kopylov, but Duncan is not Roman Kopylov. He doesn't have that same type of tenacity in his striking. He's pretty clean for the most part, got a good win over Tululin a while back, so this is a pretty simple pick in my opinion. Unless Claudio Ribeiro kind of flukes it and lands a puncher's chance type of overhand, I think that Leroy Duncan will be able to coast to a pretty easy little British decision here in this fight. So that's going to be my prediction for that one. Next fight on the card, we got Javid Basharat versus Ariel Helwani. No, I'm just playing. But it is Ayman Zahabi, Ariel Helwani's lookalike, stepping into the cage to face Javid Basharat. Whenever there's a Basharat fight, you might as well bet the fucking house on a Basharat decision because you already know that's what they're going to do. Zahabi, 36 years of age, not really anything to call home about. Just because Firas Zahabi is your coach, I think they're related or something like that. That doesn't mean he's going to be able to turn you into GSP. He's not some type of mastermind coach that can just completely change a fighter's entire game and turn them into a force to be reckoned with. I don't think that Zahabi is a force to be reckoned with whatsoever, and Javid Basharat is not afraid to stink it up in the slightest. He will land pitter-pat shots on the feet and hold you down, doing no damage and attempting no submissions on the ground, and I think he's going to stink it up with a really boring decision here and win 30-27. Next fight on the card, we got Steve Ercik versus Matt Schnell. I'm going to take Steve Ercik here by KO because Schnell is just incredibly chinny, and it really surprises me that someone can react so poorly to damage, especially in the 125-pound division, where people aren't really hitting that hard and you don't see a ton of knockouts. Schnell's doing the chicken dance every time he gets tagged on the chin, it seems, and he's been finished a lot. Usyk just has the momentum coming into this fight. He's 28 years of age compared to Matt Schnell being 34, and I think once you're past 32, especially in the flyweight division, in the lower divisions, you're really going to be at a disadvantage compared to the younger, faster guys. And I think that Steve Usyk is going to be not really living up to expectations in the first round like in his last fight, but I think he'll be able to find a KO in the second round just because Matt Schnell just doesn't really have a great chin. And if Usyk goes in there with any type of aggression whatsoever and actually follows up on his shots, he should be able to get it done. So I'm going to take Steve Usyk here by KO. Next fight on the card, we got Eric Anders versus Jamie Pickett. I'm going to be picking Eric Anders here to get a decision win. You know it's an unfortunate series of events when you have to compare who has the better losses. And in this bout, it's something that you do need to look at. So with Eric Anders, he does have some losses. He's kind of a here and there type of guy. But the guys he's losing to are higher level for the most part. The Iron Turtle, Marc-Andre Barriault, Andre Muniz, those are all tough outs. So you can kind of look past that when he's fighting guys like Jamie Pickett. Jamie Pickett on a 4-fight loss streak, unfortunately for him. He's probably going to be coming in here with some tenacity, fighting for his contract. But, you know, in his last fight, losing to Josh Frimm by decision, not a wonderful look. Of course, the Bo Nickel loss can kind of be overlooked because it's Bo Nickel. I think he's going to be a great prospect in the middleweight division. So, no real shame in losing to good old Bo. But unless we see a Jared Gooden versus Wellington Turman type of upset where the guy that has lost his last 4 somehow manages to win, I wouldn't even be surprised anymore because of how fluky MMA seems nowadays. But unless Jamie Pickett pulls off some type of Jared Gooden versus Wellington Turman type of win against Eric Anders, I think that Eric Anders overall just has a cleaner skill set and will be able to get the job done by decision. That's going to be my pick in this fight. The next fight on the card, we're getting into the really good ones now. I'm incredibly excited for this matchup. Umar Nurmagomedov versus Bekzat Almakhan. Now, I wish that Umar was fighting someone a little bit more relevant in the UFC, but looking over his record and some of his highlights and some of his film, Bekzat is legit. And I think he's going to be a good test for Umar Nurmagomedov, especially coming off of a decently long layoff, the injury, having to pull out of the Corey Sandhagen fight. But I am going to take Umar by decision here just to have a safe pick. But do not count out Bekzat to have a fun and a really telling performance. Maybe similar to Diego Lopez versus Movsar Evloev. But the way I see this fight playing out could be similar to a fight like Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev, for example. I think it's going to be a real close tit-for-tat battle. But Umar, I think, will be able to pull away with his really good kicks that he has. He'll be able to implement some damage there, be able to keep Bekzat at range, and Bekzat does prefer to use his hands a little more. Umar is more of a kicker, plus just overall MMA skill set, super well-rounded, and you kind of always have to pick the undefeated Nurmagomedov whenever they fight. I mean, he's a minus 1,000 favorite, so there's no value on picking him to actually win this fight in terms from a betting perspective. But, you know, you got Bekzat here as a plus 650 underdog. Pretty crazy. You know that a lot of these Kazakhstan guys are absolute dogs, like Shavkat Rakhmonov, for example. But I think that Umar has more experience for the most part at a higher level. Of course, has a great team around him with all of the Nurmagomedovs. And I think that he's going to continue Father's plan here, but get a close but pretty clear decision victory here over Bekzat Almakhan. But I think that Bekzat Almakhan will be able to go forward and have some really fun matchups in the future. And I think that he will be able to break into the rankings just from his skill set because it is very impressive. But Umar Nurmagomedov is truly built different. So I think that he's going to win this fight. Once he wins this fight, if he does, I think that they should give him Davidson Figueiredo. I think that would be a very, very interesting stylistic matchup and very entertaining. So I'd love to see Umar versus Figgy after this fight. And of course, after Figgy fights Cody Garbrandt at UFC 300. So, official call, Umar by decision, but do not miss this fight. It's going to be an absolute banger. Next fight on the card, we got Muhammad Mokaev versus Alex Perez. And I think whenever Mokaev fights, you basically have to choose him by sub. He is incredibly clutch when it comes to his submissions. Now, Alex Perez, he's no slouch. Been a pretty prominent figure in the flyweight division, floating in the rankings up and down the last couple of years, but he has been incredibly inactive with a lot of canceled fights. It's like Paulo Costa level amounts of cancellations, but here I am going to take Mokaev by a second round submission this time instead of a third round submission. Every single fight he's in, it's like he's just kind of coasting, not really being super dominant, maybe even losing. Like against Tim Elliott was being crafty in there and really giving him a tough out, but it's like he always just somehow finds the clutch moment to get the finish. And in his last 3 or 4, I believe it's been in the third round, which is just insane. Like, imagine if you had bet third round sub every time Mokaev has fought. You'd be up big on some plus money there. But I'm going to take him by second round sub here just because, I just can't see another third round submission happening in a row. If it does happen, then third round Mokaev is about to be a new mythical fighter. But just because I feel like the likelihood of a third round sub happening 5 times in a row is just super unlikely, I'm going to take him by second round sub here. And Mokaev, he is a very good prospect in the flyweight division. I can't wait for him to be able to get to the top of the rankings. Guys like him, guys like Manel Kape, I think are going to give some much needed variance at the top of that division because it's basically been Royval, Pantoja, and Moreno rematching each other for the last 4 years. So having a little bit of movement in the division with guys like Mokaev and Manel Kape will be great for flyweight. But in this fight, I'm going to take Muhammad Mokaev to win by second round submission. We move on to the co-main event of the evening. We got Vitor Petrino versus Tyson Pedro. I'm going to be picking Vitor Petrino to win by KO in the second round. He is a very good athlete, excellent boxing, really good jab, and I think that he's just overall much higher level and has much more potential than Tyson Pedro. I know MMA math does not work, but Tyson Pedro has lost to guys like Modestas Bukauskas, and Petrino absolutely sent that guy to the shops. So I know MMA math doesn't work, like I said, but you have to look into these common opponents between these fighters whenever you're making a prediction. And Tyson Pedro, he's been one of those guys that have just kind of plateaued in the UFC. He's never really made it to the upper echelons, despite being in the promotion for a very long time. And when he's fought guys that are higher level for the most part, like OSP, Shogun, he hasn't won. So I think that Petrino is more along the lines of a high-level fighter rather than an NPC like Anton Turkalj, who he beat last time out. I don't think he's going to be able to do the same thing to Vitor Petrino here. I think Vitor Petrino is going to win by second round KO. Just truly impose his will here, march him down, and land a nice big overhand on the chin of Tyson Pedro, followed up with some ground and pound. And I think this is going to be a good fight, though, for the most part. Hopefully these guys actually get in there and exchange in the pocket and give us a firefight. But I don't know. I just think that Vitor Petrino is going to be too much for Tyson Pedro, and I think he's going to wilt under the pressure that the big Brazilian's going to put on him. That sounded sus as fuck, but that's my prediction. Petrino round 2 KO. Moving on to the main event of the evening, we got Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Shamil Gaziev. Now, this is an interesting fight. Of course, Rozenstruik has been a mainstay in the heavyweight division for however long now, probably close to 4 or 5 years. He's a tough out for sure, but his discrepancy in his game for the most part is the grappling. We saw Curtis Blades, we saw Jelton Almeida take advantage of it. Of course, it's heavyweight. Jairzinho could land a big old uppercut or something, a big old meaty shot, and put out Shamil Gaziev. But are we really going to try and predict a puncher's chance versus a more well-rounded skill set and a 5-fight win streak? I don't really think so. Unless there's kind of a fluky situation where, it's a Derek Lewis, Curtis Blades type of shot. I think Shamil Gaziev will be able to take down big old Jairzinho Rozenstruik, and once the heavyweights are on their back, it's like flipping a turtle over on its shell. I mean, they basically can't do anything. So I really hope Gaziev doesn't stink it up and just lay on him. But I think that he's going to have more tenacity. I think he's going to be able to try and land some powerful ground and pound, maybe attack a submission. But for my official call on this fight, I'm just going to say that Shamil Gaziev will get a second round ground and pound TKO after taking Jairzinho down the first round, kind of taking the wind out of his sails. And then in the second round, closer to the end of the round, maybe at the 3 or 4 minute mark, he'll just be landing some ground and pounds that are unanswered. Not really super damaging blows, but he's not going to be getting up from the bottom. Rozenstruik, that is. Referee steps in, and second round ground and pound TKO for Shamil Gaziev. Hopefully, he can have some good performances. We need better heavyweights in the UFC, so I'm looking forward to this fight to see if he can showcase that this weekend. Thank you guys for watching the video. Let me know what you think about my predictions in the comment section below. Like, subscribe, and have a wonderful rest of your day.